y'all today? Good. Exciting morning for me. I had some other issues and had to borrow my mom's 1999 Cadillac, DeVille. So, I try, one of my things is being as real as possible. And I made a commitment to God when I got saved that I was going to be a Christian. I never wanted just to appear as a Christian. But I can tell you the humility of sitting at a red light in a 99 DeVille, hoping somebody doesn't pull up and recognize me, kind of set me back. When I ask hello or how y'all doing, this wasn't part of my prepared stuff, but Bo talking about sharing the gospel, sharing Jesus. One of the simplest ways that I found to do it, a guy named Gary Lawrence in my church mentored me. And people would ask him, how are you doing? And he'd say, super good and getting better. And I finally asked him one day, I said, man, why that response? He said, because occasionally somebody asks me why I'm doing so well. And he said, I get to share the word with them. So last 15, 18 years, that's been my response. I always use it, It's led me to be able to pray with a lady that was checking me out at Walmart. You just never know how people are doing. And you've got to be ready for that moment. You've got to be ready to share the word. Maybe they're already believers. Maybe it's just time to put a hand on the shoulder and pray for them right there. Sometimes just saying, I'm going to pray for you, it's not good enough. They need to have that hand right there on their shoulder. So anyway, Bo's remarks just kind of made me think about that. I not used to be in film, so I didn't know if I was supposed to look in the camera or not. Kind of intro, tell y'all a little bit about myself. I was born in Good Shepherd, raised here in East Texas, Pine Tree Schools my whole life, graduated Pine Tree way back in 1983. And Krista reminded me, which I've never forgotten, but she was a Longview Lobo cheerleader, and I was a Pine Tree Pirate football player, and we were the first team to ever beat the Longview Lobos from Pine Tree. So don't want to rub it in, with her. Pretty typical upbringing. I had two very loving parents. They were very loving but stern. My mom is your typical, what I would say is a Southern Belle type woman. I'm 55 for one more day, and I've never seen her without her makeup on, without her face fixed. If we were going somewhere at 4 a.m, she was up at 1:30, 2, whatever it was. Never heard a cuss word come out of her mouth. Saw her drink a margarita maybe 40 years ago down in Mexico, and she complained the whole next day. So, she's just a good woman, but she was also tough. She was the kind that, I came running in the door one day and, I was crying. In my neighborhood, my name's Mike. I was Little Mike, and there was a Big Mike. So that kind of tells you, Big Mike was a big Mike. And he had taken my bike from me and then was threatening to beat me up. So I had run home and ran in the door, panting and breathing, locked the door and explained it to her. And she put me right back out the door and told me not to come home until I got my bike. That's the kind of mom she was, and she never knew it, but I gave him $2. I had to get my bike back. So, my father was a Marine, a very loving man. He was a businessman here in Longview, well respected, entrepreneur, but he was tough. And I learned from a very early age, 5, 6. When a man walked up, I put my hand out and I introduced myself. I didn't ever leave the house without a belt on and my shirt tucked in. You squared up before you left the house. And some of his methods weren't real good. He was a pilot. And we'd flown down to Florida to pick up of all things, a man that was being released from a mental asylum and flying back to Longview. And on the way back, we hit some pretty bad thunderstorms. And I was probably 7, and I'm whimpering in the back. I'm scared, crying. And Dad finds a little deserted airfield, takes the plane down, boots me out of the plane and takes off. You know, he came back around. He just flew around the patch, but he wanted to teach me a lesson. And that's the kind. Welcome, guys. We're just about done, but you know, there's still food. That's my brother Kenneth Travis. But that's the kind of way, you know, Dad was. Like I said, you know, a Marine. He's tough. No fear. You know, most kids learn to hunt with their dads, and I did. But you know, by the time I was 7, I was hunting out of my own deer stand. He would put me in a stand. He'd go to his, and he'd come back and get me. You know, one night he was a little late, and you know, being a kid, I'm scared. I heard some rustling, and I called out, you know, Dad, is that you? And he heard me. Well, he went on around the deer stand, went back to camp. I felt like I was out there all night. He told me it was just till like 7:30, but you know, to a kid, those minutes turned into hours, and you know, fir trees turned into Bigfoot. It was not a good time. So anyway, that was you know, just to kind of let you know where I came from, you know, as far as that goes. I guess it was between 6th and 7th grade, my dad got diagnosed with cancer of the bile duct. And I didn't think anything could hurt my dad. But for 2 years, he suffered, was in and out of the hospital, back and forth to Herman Hospital in Houston. And right about my 8th grade year, he passed away from it. And the reason I tell you that is because that's a large part of who I am today. For a boy to lose his father at that point where you're supposed to be learning to become a man, what it takes to be a man, it's a critical time. So that has influenced me greatly as far as my heart and the ministries that I've worked in and what I want to do in the future. I did have a man step in, and you know, just real quick, I'd kind of deleted this out of my comments, but throughout 8th and 9th grade, the head coach from the football team, we were in a different campus, 8th and 9th, different campus than high school at Pine Tree. Coach Maurice Cook would come down and visit with me from time to time. And then when I got into high school for 3 years, Coach Cook came every morning. My mom would fix me 2 bacon and egg sandwiches. He would come down and sit with me, eat a sandwich, and ask me, what's up? What's going on in your life? Didn't give a whole lot of advice unless I asked for it. Just let me know that he cared. He introduced me to FCA, got me involved with Fellowship of Christian Athletes, but kind of a foreshadowing of how I rebelled. You know, basically all I did in FCA was because I needed it on my resume to go to college. It wasn't about my faith. It wasn't about somebody else's faith. It was me using something. And that's kind of the person I became. Kind of skipping into college, people ask me, well, when did you go to college? And I say, in the 80s. And invariably they'll say, when in the 80s? Pretty much the 80s. So I started a summer session 8 days after graduation, University of Texas. You know, I go from 15 kids in the class at Pine Tree to 400 in a theater style setting. I go from driving up and down 80 to staggering down 6th Street. I wasn't cut out for that like so many kids aren't. So after 2 semester summer sessions, I think that the way they phrased it, they were freeing me up to excel at another college. So I came back and went to Kilgore College, Harvard on the Highway. From there, just kind of danced around North Texas, ended up back at UT a number of years later. But college was a big party for me. And it began to influence my life, the drinking. Never got into drugs. Probably, in my thinking, the only reason was that I couldn't let my mom down. Even as bad as the things I was doing, with my father being dead, if she ever thought that I was on drugs or got arrested for that, it would have killed her. So, but everything else, man, I was as shallow as they come. You know, the drinking, I wasn't a thief, I wasn't out stealing, but I did bad things. I worked at a lot of bars as a bouncer. I love to fight. I'd pick a fight just to have some fun. But made it through college and was still down at UT. And my best friend, been best friends since fourth grade, Travis Briscoe. We roomed together, or lived in an apartment here in Long. We went to Kilgore together. Went up to North Texas together, joined a fraternity together. Still my best friend today. He had graduated and taken a job running a construction company, contracting company for Tommy Merritt with Eastman up in Kingsport, Tennessee. And he called me down in Austin. We're talking. He said, "Man, you sound depressed. What's wrong? You're never depressed." I said, "Bro, I'm not depressed. I'm tired." I'd taken a job as a credit manager for Rent-A-Center. I didn't live through the 80s on my parents' money. I worked my way through school for the big part of it. But my job was delinquent accounts. I either had to get the money or I had to repossess the couch, TV, washing machine, refrigerator, whatever it was. And my area was South Austin. I don't know how to describe it. It was a very rough place. There were literally prostitutes hanging out in the parking lot of our store office there. I was living with 4 guys from here in Longview that were 18 years old, 19. Their parents were paying their way through. All they had to do was take 12 hours and, party. And I was taking a full load still at this time. So I was just tired, and he told me, he said, "Man," "come up here to Kingsport and work for me." "Doing what?" He said, "You be my safety man." I said, "What's a safety man?" He said, "Man, don't worry about it. All you got to do is play golf and yell at people." Well, I'm in. I can do that job. So off to Tennessee I went, and again, I believe it was God's hand taking me up there. I fell into industrial safety. I consider myself a high achiever. I went through all the OSHA schools in Des Plaines, Illinois. Came back here when Tommy Merritt started a safety consulting business. I was president of that company at a young age. But that's where I really got self-absorbed. My life was about me. I was a believer. I was raised in a Christian home. One thing I was talking about my dad a while ago, I remember asking him in the car one day. I was upset. We were at church every time the doors opened. And I said, "Why?" And he said, "Son," and this was after he was diagnosed with cancer, he said, "When you face your own mortality, one day you'll understand." And today I understand that. I don't feel like I'm, fixing to kick the bucket, but, in your 50s, you start looking at that mortality, So I'm glad I brought notes because I just lost my whole train of thought when I went on that tangent. But I was self-absorbed. Life was about me. It was about the dollar. I got my self-worth in what other people thought about me. I bought custom clothes I couldn't afford. I bought a German sports car I couldn't afford. I ran with a crowd of men around Longview that I couldn't afford. Guys that, at the drop of a hat could take off and, head to Colorado for a 2-day skiing trip in their private jet. And, I'm over here trying to pay my American Express and eating beanie weenies, But I look good, They thought I had money. I tried to, but that's where my self-worth came from, what everybody else thought about me. I had to have the prettiest girl because I thought, I'm an ugly guy. But if I got this girl, everybody thinks I've got something else, I call it the BBD. I was always looking for that bigger and better deal. So, and that's the before. Bo told me my whole instructions would talk about a little about the before and a lot about the after. So, that's who I was, a self-absorbed, believer, but not understanding what a relationship was with Christ. I'm living out Lake Cherokee. I can remember laying in my bed and crying. And there were probably, 40, 60 people in my house out on the deck. During this time, I became what's called a binge alcoholic. I didn't drink every day, but when Thursday evening hit, it was on till Sunday. I just pass out a couple of hours, I was back up drinking. And I never wanted the party to end. So, I'm out here at McCann Street Bar and Grill, and I would bring the whole party back to my house because I wasn't going to stop at whatever closing time, 2 o'clock. But I'm laying in my bed and I'm crying because I'm lonely. I was searching for something, my heart was. I thought it was true friendship. I thought maybe it was a relationship with a girl. Excuse me. But I came to find out that it was something else. It wasn't maybe 2 weeks later, and I'm there at the house, get a knock on the door, and I go look through the peephole. It's an old football friend of mine from Pine Tree, Mike, we called him Yappy Teague. He was the youth minister for New Beginnings here in Longview. And man, I thought, what day? Oh my God, it's Wednesday. It's visitation. I knew enough about the Baptists. He didn't come out to visit. He came out to visit. So I opened the door and, I told him, I said, Mike, man, I know you're here to save me. I said, I don't need saving. I said, you want to talk football, let me get a beer and a cigarette. Let's go out here on my pier and, we'll talk about the old times. And we did for a couple of hours. And Mike was he said, look, I can't leave without asking you. He said, how's your faith life? I said, Mike, I said, faith is a big word to me. And I started to talk, and without just going into 2 hours of the testimony, Mike explained to me, I think one of my comments was, I'm not worthy. God's not going to love a man like me, And I think that's something that a lot of men struggle with, even after we're saved, is that, and women too, but we're not worthy. And Mike went on to explain what I call an agape love. Mike explained God's grace to me. I hadn't heard grace. What I'd heard was hellfire and brimstone. That was, the limited preaching I'd had. So without going into it a lot more, maybe an hour and a half later, there was a lot of crying, a lot of snot slinging. He wanted to call the church, and I didn't realize it, but there was like 20-something people back there that had been praying that whole time. Because my sister and brother-in-law went to that church, and they had specifically asked for this visit. So God intervened, and my life was radically changed. I quit going out to the bars. Not so much that I was convicted, but I knew people would say, that Christianity didn't last long with him. Mike's already fallen back in his old ways. I totally quit drinking. Didn't have another drink. I started visiting churches and ended up going over to New Beginnings, and I chose that as my home church. I started developing a friendship with Brother Dick Stagner, which Dick has passed away now, but another reason was the realness of people. I remember I was in a Sunday school class and they asked everybody, tell us one thing that nobody knows about you. And a friend of ours, Seth Reeves, replied, well, I guess nobody knows I didn't wear underwear today. And I thought, man, I'm home. If people can be that real, I'm here. And, there were guys walking around, with cowboy boots on, rough guys. I wasn't a nice guy. I wasn't going to fit into a nice church. My perception was, everybody walks in the door and says, hey, how's everything? Great. God's good today. Yeah. Nobody says, well, my wife and I had a horrible fight last night, or, I found a joint in my son's car. Just the daily parts of life, man. I needed to be where things were real, where we could talk about it. So I started Yo New Beginnings. Dick and I started a friendship. Matter of fact, we walked every day for 3 years, other than Sundays, rain, sleet, or shine. And man, that was like having full access to, a mentor every morning. I just pumped him full of questions. And he would get tired of it some mornings. He'd tell me, son, that one's deeper than you are. He said, come back and see me this afternoon at the office and we'll talk about that one. So it was, told this a while ago, but sometimes I'm not politically correct, and if I offend anybody while I'm talking today, it's just me. I mean, I offend a lot of people. Brother Dick came to me after I'd been in church just 3 or 4 weeks. He said, I'd like to give you testimony. I said, where at? He said, here at church up there. Nah. Why not? He said, I know you talk to people all the time. I said, you're in front of crowds. I said, Brother Dick, I said, my life changed. I said, but a lot of my old habits hadn't. I said, I'm trying, man, but I got a bad mouth. And I said, I get excited. Man, I'm liable to cuss, and I'm excited about the Lord. I said, I can't get up in the pulpit and, man, let something slip. And I'll never forget, Dick looked at me, he tilted his head over and put that grin on that he always had. He said, oh boy, hell, we all do sometimes. And again, that was just, oh man, I got up and gave my testimony in 2 weeks. I didn't cuss, but, Dick worked through me. He had me, I went there 6 weeks and he had me plugged in. I was teaching Sunday school. Man, I didn't know scripture. Still don't. I'm not great with scripture. But it made me learn scripture to teach other people. He knew that I had to be plugged in. Well, I think I'm about 8 pages in front of my notes here. It wasn't very long after I was saved, and for those that my personality, one, I'm an outdoorsman. I love hunting and fishing. But I'm used to be more of an adrenaline junkie than I am now. I knew I needed to do something, man. I knew the Great Commission. I wanted to go out and spread God's word. I didn't want to go to a staycation or stay mission, whatever they call it. And, I didn't want to go to Chicago. I didn't want to go to Guatemala. I didn't want to go to Rwanda. That was kind of like a tourist deal to me. I didn't understand it. I wanted to jump out of a plane over communist China and smuggle Bibles in. I contacted a priest in Haiti. I'm going to Haiti. I want to go to Soviet Russia, the bad part. That was my mindset. And God took me in a different direction. I was going fishing one day, and I'm at Pop's Landing out on Lake of the Pines, and the old friend, he was putting in his boat, and we started visiting, and he said, man, you've been making a lot of changes in your life. What's going on? And I started telling him. I was able to share the gospel with him that day. And right there on those iron ore rocks, we kneeled down on our knees, and he accepted God, Jesus Christ, as his Savior. And that night, as I'm thinking about it, man, I'm just like, it's just blowing me away. But I realized, man, that's my mission. I don't have to go out to the wilds of Africa. I don't have to go to Russia. Man, there's people right here that need to hear the word. And there was a lot of guys like me that were rough around the edges, that were, man, I can pray in a deer stand. That's where I'm closest to God. Absolutely. I still believe, I love it. No better place to see the hand of God than the outdoors. But we still need to be in church. We need the body. We need to be there. So I'm thinking about all this. God puts it on my heart to start a outdoor ministry, sportsman's ministry. Didn't have a lot of direction, didn't know what I was going to do, but started putting some things together. And one day I'm getting my hair cut. Believe it or not, I had hair. And the little girl was an old girlfriend of mine, and I'm telling her about what God's put on my heart. She's just a wonderful Christian girl. And she said, you're not going to believe this, but there was a man sitting in the same chair not 2 hours ago, told me the same story. I said, no. She said, yeah. And she tells me his name. And I said, well, I think I went to school with him in the 4th grade. Is he a great big man? She said, oh, he's a beast. He's huge. Now, that's the guy, She said, do you mind if I tell him what you've told me today? I said, absolutely not. So about 2 days later, I get a call, and this deep voice says, Mike White. I said, yeah, and we talked for a minute. He said, son, I just got one question for you. He said, are you a Christian? I said, well, I am. I said, I'm a new one, but I'm a Christian. He said, that's good, because if you weren't, just fixing to be, boy. So he wasn't a hunter and fisherman, but he had boys that were enjoying it. So that's why it kind of been put on his heart. And we combined, and we just start brainstorming, what are we going to do? And one day I found these New Testaments on the internet, the little small pocket version, and they were camouflage. And I thought, man, that'd be great, hand those out. We'll buy some, do something with. Burnish this thing, but he said, why don't we get a booth at the RV and Boat Show? We'll hand out New Testaments. And that sounds great, And I think that was when he introduced just one to me. He said, maybe we can affect just one. So what do you mean just one? He said, man, all we got to do is be there for that one person. That maybe it's thrown in a tackle box in the bottom of the boat, or it's in a hunting bag. But at their lowest point, they find that Bible, that New Testament, and they read it through a period of their life. So anyway, I called up, I forget, Ledco, whoever runs that, and they'd already booked out all the booths. Find out the Bibles, they're $2 a piece. We find out that the boat show, I think 6,000 people went through it over the 3 days, something like that. $12,000, man, we didn't have enough to buy, a sandwich, much less $12,000 worth of Bibles to hand out. So I'm all, don't give up. He said, I want you to pray. Okay. I tell you, I didn't pray as hard as I should have. I was still caught up a little bit in the world as a businessman. I'm thinking, well, we do a raffle, or, how can we get this money? I'm trying to figure out how I can do it again instead of turning it over to God. But some days rocked by, and I got a call one day, and it was from, again, whoever was running the boat show, and they said, hey, we had a cancellation. Would y'all like the booth? And I don't think we can afford it. We can't even afford the Bibles. And well, you don't have to, because the group that dropped out has already paid, and they're losing their money, so you get it free. Well, let me call my buddy. So I called him, and I'm thinking, maybe we can buy $1,000 worth and hand them out to, kids under this tall or something, whatever it was. And Barnes answers the phone, and he's laughing. And he said, you've been praying, haven't you, boy? I said, well, a little bit. He said, let me tell you what happened. He said, God's answered a prayer. And, I'm thinking maybe he's already, they called him or something too. He said, I told a guy just yesterday that we were in dire need of some money for this ministry. And he came by today and dropped a check off. He said, you know how much that check was for? I said, let me guess. He said, don't guess. It was $12,000. Exactly what we needed, So we went ahead and got the booth. We went up there and we handed out, 5,000 New Testaments. We had some guys join us, and we would alternate, take turns, but when we had a break, we'd go outside and we would pray. Just one, shoulder, and God, just let us affect one life. Maybe that one multiplies it and spreads the seeds out. So, I think Friday evening, the Longview News Journal came and did an article on us. And Saturday and Sunday, people were showing up. God showed up and showed out. People offering us land, people offering us ponds to fish in, people bringing up fishing equipment that they had in their garage, hunting clothing, just anything you can imagine to help these boys and men. So it ended. We thank God, and we really felt like He had moved. A couple of weeks, a couple of months, rocked by, and I was teaching Sunday school, and he had walked out, and Brother Dick caught me, and he said, did you see that young boy get saved this morning? I said, no, I was in Sunday school during first service. He said, yeah, we had a 12-year-old boy from Hawkins get saved this morning. Come down front during the altar call and got saved. I said, well, that's cool. We had people saved pretty much every weekend, and, I was excited about it, but, I didn't make a huge deal. And he said, well, that's not the coolest part about it all. And I said, well, tell me. And he said, him and his mama from Hawkins, they opened up a Longview phone book and put their finger down. That's how they chose New Beginnings. I said, man, that's cool. He said, well, that's still not the coolest part right now. I said, well, come on, Dick, tell me what's going on. He said, boy, that boy's mama told me that the only reason they were going to church is because her son had been pestering her to go to church since he got a little camouflage Bible at the boat show and started reading it. Amen. I have no doubt that was my one. I am somebody that needs to be pumped up. God, I can be on the mountain one day and in the valley the next sometimes. And God doesn't whisper to me. I don't hear a gentle whisper. He slaps me in the head. I tell you, it's God the Father, and he treats me like a son. And I treat him like a father. But there's no doubt in my mind today. I mean, that was his encouraging me and showing me that was the one. Again, I'm sorry. I thought I needed notes, but apparently there was my one, so I'm back on track. So during this time, I met a woman. I didn't get married till my mid 40s, but I met this girl at church. Felt like God was in it, but I didn't pray about it. Met her at church. She comes up the second time to me, and I'm teaching her in Sunday school, or I'm teaching the class, and she's looking at me, and I just had that weird feeling. And guys, I had, like I said, 2 different lives, man. There was pre-church and post-church, and it embarrassed me when people would know me from my old days. And she's looking at me, and I'm thinking, oh man, she knows me from the bars, and maybe I've kissed her. I don't know. And she said, she comes up to me, I guess the second week, she said, where were you in 1983? So I graduated high school, that's about all I can tell you. She said, that summer. I said, well, I worked for a man named Ronald Abernathy out at Lake Cherokee, keeping up his lake houses. And she said, yeah, I met you that summer. I was 15 and you gave me my first kiss. So I used to be bad about reading things like that as signs. I'm like, well, God's in this. He's brought that girl back in my life. But anyway, we continued to date and ended up getting married. But Rhonda at that time had 2 boys, 5 and 7. Cameron, the youngest, Colin, the oldest. And those boys became my life even before I married her. They needed a male influence in their lives. So I backed away from the ministry because I had to focus on these boys. And now, I don't know, the next 10, 15 years, that was my focus, Like I said, we ultimately got married and then divorced. Toughest thing that's ever happened because of my commitment to my vows. Not sure that I even liked her at that point, but I would not leave until I knew that God wasn't in it. And then, I finally realized that. But those boys changed my life. I used to hunt and fish a lot. I still got to go, but I didn't get to do much hunting and fishing. It was baiting their lines, letting them shoot my deer, all of that, which I loved. I loved passing it on. They were good kids. They good hearts. They weren't good kids. They were 2 boys, and they were a handful. But all in all, they were good. Typical kids. They played football at Spring Hill. Colin his real father was a aerospace engineer, rocket scientist. Colin was that type of intellect. He took things apart to figure out if he could put them back together or see how they worked. But he was a tremendous sportsman too. Even at a young age, 7, 8 years old, 10, Colin would sit out back with a BB gun, a pellet gun, and a Coke can hanging in a tree where it's moving a little bit with the wind, and he would work on his breathing and his trigger pull. I don't know many men, other than no devil dogs like that practice that hard on something to develop a skill. He became my constant partner. Cameron was still a little young. He didn't want to go on overnight trips and things, but I made a deal with Colin on deer. He had to shoot 10 does before I'd let him shoot a buck. I've never liked guys that took their sons out and paid a couple of $1,000 to let them shoot this big buck, because where do you go after that? It's all downhill now. And Colin's last, his 10th doe was at the Bosico Ranch, and 292 yards, I think. He shot this doe at, I guess, 8 years old. And so a couple of weeks later, I took him down to a friend's ranch, and we get in the deer stand, and guys, it's 200, 300-inch deer. I mean, they're massive trophy deer that people are paying lots of money for. I'm not going to let him shoot that. He's going to shoot a cull buck. And, you can't shoot that one. No, boy. No, boy, don't even put the gun up, because I can't write a check for that, And, but anyway, a 7-point comes out, and it's a good old deer. And I said, boy, there's your deer. And immediately, and I could hear that. I'm worried about that microphone. That heart start thumping. And he lays the gun up. Like I said, 2 or 3 weeks before, he shot it almost 300 yards. This darn deer's 40 yards out in broadside, and he blows rocks all over it. I mean, shot right in front of it. And I was like, boom! And I looked, and tears are coming down his face. And immediately, I'm, man, it's okay. It's okay. We all do it. I do it. So, but anyway, that weekend he did end up getting his deer. So, but I guess just to kind of tell you what kind of kid Colin was. Bron and I divorced, and just about 5 years ago, I was laying in bed, and I got a call nobody wants to get. I knew when I saw her face pop up on my phone at 4 a.m. that something was wrong. And I said, is everybody okay? And she said, screaming, he's gone. Colin's gone. Colin OD'd. Colin had a great life. He graduated, was going up to Oklahoma State University. He was fishing on a scholarship on their bass team that had won the national championship. God, I wish I had an opportunity to fish for school, But it was the worst thing that I've ever dealt with to this day. Colin, I never was one of those parents that blamed other people, I knew that he had gotten involved and was, smoking some marijuana, but never in my life did I think that it would go anywhere past that. I had the boys trained. I mean, I could say, tell Bo what happens if I ever catch out with drugs. Well, Michael, get out of jail before we get out of the hospital. That was the answer. And, but anyway, he had experimented. I feel like through conversations with his friends up there, that was all it was. But Colin tried something that, like so many things are around here, or everywhere, had been laced with fentanyl. And fentanyl takes about 2 pieces about the size of a grain of salt to kill you. And he simply went to sleep. But anyway, that week was horrible. I've equated it to being, out in the middle of the ocean during a hurricane. Man, I couldn't breathe. The waves were, that far apart and crashing on top of me. Relying on my faith, praying. But God stepped in. I don't like going to open caskets. I didn't want to see Colin. I wanted to remember him just like I did the last time I saw him. His father called me. He said, I need you to come up here. It took us about a week to get his body. But anyway, I wasn't going to go when they were going to view the body. And his dad called and said, I need you up here. And he said, I need you to help me get through this. Okay. So we get up to the funeral home. And again, it's like being in that storm. I couldn't catch my breath. I'm tears. I'm crying. Wailing, sobbing. And I just, God, I can't do this. You got to get me through this. And, skeptics will, be skeptics. But for you believers, I felt a hand on my shoulder as I'm walking up there, and I realized it was going to be okay. The tears dried up. Not to say I didn't cry again, but I was okay. I was able to help his father, do what I could. My doctor had already prescribed me, Valium or whatever it was, because I knew I wasn't going to get through a funeral. I never had to take a pill. God was right there with me. Colin messed up. Don't blame anybody else. God forgave him. Colin was a Christian. I know where his heart was. I know that he accepted Jesus. If I knew I could call him back today, there's no way I would do it. Man, if anything, I want to go join him. You know, as much as I miss that boy, to know where he's at and what he's doing, man, I couldn't ask somebody to come back from something like that. So, one more thing on Colin. Maybe a week or 10 days later, I had to go get all this stuff at the school. And I'd found out the guy that he was dealing with was a drug dealer. He looked like your typical frat boy, you know, good looking, had lots of money, or looked like he had money from his clothes. And I called him and said, I want to get Colin's stuff. And he said, well, just come on to the apartment. I said, no, boy. I said, you're a drug dealer. So I'm not getting behind closed doors with you. I said, you load it up and meet me at the Walmart parking lot. So he shows up and he's got a little girl with him. And I kind of talked to him for a minute. And I said, let me ask you something, son. I said, do you think this little girl that's with you right now, when she was young and dreaming of her Prince Charming, thought, man, I hope I get to marry a drug dealer one day. You know, God, I hope I marry somebody that's, you know, hurting our society. You know, I was being mean, but I wanted to be mean to him a little bit. Be honest, you know, man, I wanted to kill him at one point. I wanted to put the blame on somebody. I didn't want to blame my son, you know, but it was his fault. But anyway, I got Colin's stuff and I talking to him, and I'll never forget. I said, son, I said, I want to do something. And the kid looked at me. He said, are you fixing to kill me? I said, no, son, I'm not. I said, I want to pray for you. For that boy in the parking lot. Pray for the little girl. I've not kept up with them. Don't know whatever happened. But again, God stepped in, allowed me to pray, maybe to minister to them. I don't know if it, you know, helped them or not, but it helped me. You know, I don't know, purified my heart, if you will. That's why, you know, I can't be bitter about Colin passing away. Bo, you just, if I get to going too long, tell me to wrap it up. During all this period, like I said, I'd stepped away, but I'd met, do I need to shut down? Real fast then. I met a man through Colin. I'd taken a job with him. He said, I would like you to join my team, but I don't know what I can put you in right now. He said, all I have is a safety position. Do you think you could figure that out till I can get you into something else? Well, man, I had 20 years of safety at that point, 15. He didn't know it. And I thought, you know, I'm going to pray about it, but I think me and God in on this one together, you know. So I took a job with Scott's company, and Jay Dean owned the company. And my first day, I show up, and the two of them set me down, and they explained not only I have safety, but I've got HIV, I've got this and that. And then they told me, I said, but you got to take care of business. But the biggest thing we want is a Baptist minister. That's why, man, I'm no minister. I said, yeah, but you can minister to our people. We want somebody that can, you know, show up to the hospital when their wife's sick. Somebody that knows when somebody can't pay their electric bill. You know, somebody that knows when their son's in trouble. To sit with them and pray with them. If they're having trouble getting a home loan, to take them to, you know, the right person, or to buy a car, or if they're investing, where to take them, because some of them don't know. Just be that person that ministers to our people. That became my new ministry. Man, I just, what a blessing. So that carried on now for probably the last 20 years. I've been through 4 companies with these guys. The last one company that I worked for was not with them, but I was basically doing the same thing. Had other duties, but it was about being a cheerleader, a life coach, a minister, and just working with these people. I mean, God couldn't put me into a better position. I did get laid off last year. Haven't worked in about a year. Was figuring out some business plans to open up my own business. God put it on my heart to open up a sportsman's ministry instead. So I'm stepping out in faith. You know, I pretty much lost most of my retirement through my investment with a company. May go back to work with another group part-time. You know, how it works out, God only knows. but we're going to do a ministry. Primary focus is on fatherless boys. I do want to work with other boys. I want to work with men. We're going to have a monthly devotional where guys show up. It'll be godly, but it'll also be tied back into hunting and fishing. We're going to have monthly meetings with the boys. It's not going to be the Cub Scouts, I can tell you that. You know, we're going to push them. We're going to have fun, and they're going to learn about God. They're going to learn about civic duty. They're going to know about investing in other people. They're going to learn about community. And then lastly, something that I'm really proud of, I'm really excited about, I started an Instagram account. I'm not a big social media person because I wanted to build excitement. I wanted to be able to reach out to the kids in this area, so I went on with finding them on Spring Hill School and Pine Tree School. About 4 months ago, today we got 5,000 followers. So, you know, we're talking about in another 4 months, maybe 6 months, 10,000. Well, I started posting little snippets of preaching, maybe a little bit about the gospel or not, how not to let fear overtake you. So I call it peppering, I'm kind of peppering that with some God, I try to be positive. What really broke my heart was kids like, I had a kid friend me, Spawning 666. I thought, this got to be a troll. So I went on and looked at, I don't look at most of them, desperation and despair, comments about suicide. I was able to reach out to him. So anyway, I know Bo's getting nervous. We're going to do a social media ministry where we film hunts, film fishing trips. I'm working with some guys, we're calling them field pastors, that are going to develop, some scriptural and biblical stuff to pepper the stories with. And hopefully with these, 5,000 now, but, if I put up a video, we're probably getting 1,500 people watch that video. 1,500 people watch it. Again, can we just get that one? So anyway, wrap up. Guys, that's my life. God's allowed me to minister in some amazing ways. Not every day is the greatest day, but God's always there with me. I appreciate y'all letting me share my story.